that service has about 1,200 companies enrolled in it today.
Wow.
And it's blocked 4 billion malicious domains for the companies enrolled. We are blocking botnets, ransomware, malware command and control before that they can even visit the site. And so we have prevented significant pre-ransomware staging attacks by just blocking the connection.
Welcome to Cyber Focus from the McCrary Institute, where we explore the people and ideas shaping and defending our digital world. I'm your host, Frank Cilluffo, and this week I have the privilege to sit down with the chief of the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center at the National Security Agency, Kristina Walter. Kristina is a plank holder of the center, has been there from day one, and has an incredible background in the intelligence community at the National Security Agency, and was also working on NSA's future workforce. So lots to discuss here, lots to unpack. And Kristina, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I thought we'd start at the start, and that is looking at the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center at NSA, what its vision was, and now coming back to be the chief, what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so we tend to be the new kid on the block when it comes to public-private partnership.
But you punch above your weight.
We try to. And so, we stood up about 5 years ago, really recognizing that the National Security Agency has two main functions. We have a foreign intelligence, signals intelligence function, and then we have a combat support function where we work with DoD to secure military communications. And really, when we looked at how we could best achieve that function, we recognized that industry plays such a critical role in providing warfighter capabilities, the Department of Defense capabilities. And so if we're not talking to them about what they're seeing happening on their networks, we're not going to be able to help them secure them. That was one part. And the second part was really our visibility is entirely foreign in nature. So we see what plans and intentions are, what the adversaries might be doing overseas, but we lack that visibility once they come into the United States. And so if we can't partner with US-based companies who are the ones being targeted day in and day out, we can't really fully understand the picture of what's happening. And so in the past,
what the Brits call the rich picture.
Correct. Right? In the past, we weren't able to do that for various reasons. Competitive advantage, who do we work with, who do we not work with? And when we stood up the center, we recognized that focusing around the defense industrial base, the technology and the cybersecurity companies who support them, the supply chain, that's really the ecosystem that is where our bread and butter is from a partnership perspective.
So very much starting with the defense industrial base, but you're expanding. What does your membership look like?
Yeah, so we started 5 years ago with 2 partners. We are up over 1,500 partners now.
Wow.
And so I think when most people think defense industrial base, they think of those large DIB primes, the big companies whose names are all on the buildings around government facilities. But we recognize that landscape is hundreds of thousands of companies. So any company that does business with the Department of Defense is eligible to participate in our service. That's we bin them into different categories. So obviously, big DIB companies, they have robust cybersecurity capabilities. They can action technical information. We want to share information with them. But on the other side is as those companies got better in cyber, we saw adversaries do 2 things. 1, go to the supply chain, the kind of weakest link below them, or 2, go up through their service provider, whether it's their cloud provider, their internet service provider. And so we work with the full spectrum from, manufacturer who's making a really unique part for the defense industrial base to the internet service providers, cloud providers, cybersecurity companies in that space.
And obviously the mission assurance role is critical because if you can't project power, deploy forces, kind of game over, right?
Absolutely.
And that includes other sectors though, like transportation and the like. How do you wrap your arms around that?
Yeah, so I would say our strategy is twofold. So one, again, with those service providers, when we're working with a cloud provider or cybersecurity company, we don't tell them that they can't use our information to defend all of their customers, whether that's energy, water, power companies. So they can really take the intelligence we give them and action it as broad as they can. So that's one strategy. The other one is looking at critical suppliers to combatant commands, weapons platforms, and providing free cybersecurity services to those companies to make sure that they have that continuity of operations.
Awesome. And if you had to sort of pick 2-3 things that are essential, because we've talked a lot about public-private partnerships, and I always say trust is the coin of the realm. That's easy to say, and it's very hard to earn, very easy to lose, but I'd be curious what your thoughts are thus far.
Yeah, I think for us, building that trust was not something we inherently thought we would get with our industry partners. I mentioned we started with 2 partners who said, sure, we're willing to try out this program. Our program is entirely collaborative. We don't pay the companies to partner with us. We want to show up with the intelligence that's valuable to them. And so I think we had a lot of partners who said, sure, I'll sign a non-disclosure agreement and enroll in your service. I'm used to the government taking information from me and never giving anything back. We have really focused on pushing out as much unclassified but non-public intelligence to our companies as possible, to the extent where some of them say, okay, that's too much. Can we talk through what would you do? But building that trust early on by showing the commitment to sharing was one. And I think 2 was we can't surge trust in a crisis. We have found that having that established relationship meant that when something did go wrong for some of these companies, they knew who to turn to and how to work with us and how we would protect the information that they gave us.
Very well said. In the counterterrorism world, we used to say you can't be exchanging business cards on game day.
Exactly.
So it's sort of the same concept. And I want to get into the threat in a second, but before sort of jumping into that, I've heard lots of positive stories from the defense industrial base. Any examples that you can share? Because it is normally it's seen as a one-way street, a lot of the public-private, at least in information sharing initiatives, but you really do lean forward and give back. So
so I would say, we do a lot with our partners. And so one of the examples that we'll talk about, and I know we're not quite at the threats discussion yet, but when we talk about China specifically, they are uniquely positioned to target the United States from the United States. That's how they function because they know that we lack visibility there. And so over the last several years, we really are in daily collaboration with our partners on what these obfuscation networks are, we call them, where China has compromised a small home or office router and they're targeting from there, or a local university computer and then they target from there. And so we're trying to build out what these networks look like. And it is a constant collaboration with the internet service providers and the cloud providers. We've enumerated 300,000 nodes that we see China using targeting the United States. And so through that illumination, we've able to find zero-day vulnerabilities that the community wasn't tracking because we recognized, hey, this network that we know is China's operated is connecting to one of our defense contractors. Let's talk to them about what they see. Oh, we see this environment being compromised. We've rebuilt the environment. They're coming back. There's a previously unknown vulnerability. We're able to bring in all the different vendors to see that activity. In that particular case, we recognized that it was a vulnerability we hadn't seen before. We built detections for it, but we had no idea if they were any good or if they were specific to one partner. We shared it out with the other defense contractors, found out 4 other ones were being impacted by this zero-day vulnerability. So those are the types of campaigns that would have taken months to years to find previously. We found it in about 2 weeks of the start of exploitation, and we're able to get out the hunting and the detections while the patch was being worked so that we could do it all together and try to remediate the threat.
It's a great story, and I hear from a lot of the DIB partners great anecdotes along those lines. And okay, you made me go to the threat. So I mean, Volt Typhoon, I think, was the eye-opener and the broader concept of living off the land. Firstly, did that surprise you?
I think it did surprise us to see the change in the techniques with which China was targeting the U.S. I think everybody was very familiar with, looking for intellectual property, going after the big and the small companies, but for espionage, to, steal secrets for their own gain.
Rather
it was
than
definitely a change in technique to see that. And I think that was really something that we needed to work together to fully understand. We had cybersecurity companies coming into us saying, we are seeing this actor, they look incredibly sophisticated, we believe it's China, but they're not doing normal things we see. It's non-intelligence targets, it's living off the land, it's just making sure they have access every couple of months. Can you help us understand that? And that's when it's important for us to go back and look and say, what do we see from a plans intentions perspective, and is it changing? And we were able to put those puzzle pieces together to say, yes, this is a serious change in traditional espionage to pre-positioning that the entire community should be concerned about.
And fair to say it helps the U.S. government as well. I mean, we're getting much better visibility and attribution is improving, right? Attribution
is improving, I think, across the board. Industry is exceptional at attribution these days as well. I think we all follow, the diamond model of understanding where are they coming from, what are they targeting, what's the tools and tradecraft they use, and who the actors are. And so when it came to that, our goal was the U.S. government is never going to be able to hunt across all critical infrastructure and detect and eradicate China, who has a huge cyber force that's trying to pre-position in the U.S. What we can do is partner with our industrial base and equip them to hunt for it. So that was really our focus, was how do we work with interagency partners and industry to expose this tradecraft of living off the land that we hadn't seen before, and really unleash the cybersecurity community in the United States to find it and eradicate it on the U.S. government's behalf. And frankly, we see that all the time. They are coming in to tell us, we see this sector being targeted, we're working with this one, and we're getting them out of our networks.
And you know, I've been a little grumpy with the public-private partnership discussion. I've been saying long on nouns, short on verbs, but we are starting to see some operational collaboration, right? And that's the only way you really build trust in the foxhole together, fighting the same fight at the same time. 100%. And when it matters, they'll be there, right?
100%, yeah. And I think we always talk about information sharing, and information sharing is step one. Like, are you going to commit to sharing intelligence with us, and are you going to protect the information I share back? Exactly. And then two is, how do we actually integrate our operations together? And I think we've seen that with looking at these obfuscation networks that I mentioned earlier. You know, we have industry partners who are saying, if you tell me that this is Chinese-owned command and control, and I can validate it, that it's abusing my terms and conditions, I will null route traffic globally to that. That's really annoying for China. So we really like that. Deal. On the second hand, how can our law enforcement colleagues take down these botnet infrastructure? How can our Five Eyes partners do it? When we all do that together, that's where we really cause a disruption to their operations, and that's coordinated action together.
And I think this sometimes gets lost in D.C. I mean, these are all movies coming to a theater near you. So our allies matter in all of this, right?
Absolutely.
And I love seeing the seals of multiple services around the world. I hope you continue down that path. But I do think you touched on law enforcement, and this is just me speaking here. Please don't put I'm not putting words in your mouth. But at the end of the day, NSA, FBI have the most to offer from an intelligence perspective to industry. Everyone else is a pass-through, maybe CIA, but that's basically the big three. And you mentioned sort of working with law enforcement, and I think this comes really into play with pre-ransomware indicators and the like, anything, because I'd love to see those operations scale. The one and dones are great. But that's a blip. If we want to change the course of events, it's got to be a little more strategic.
Yeah,
right?
and I think when we talk about the threats, what we really see is these adversaries are lazy in most cases. They will go after the easiest target, the unpatched system, the malicious domain that they can get you to visit that's hosting their malware. And so the same techniques that harden against the really sophisticated actors also protect against the cyber criminals, the ransomware actors. And so what we have found is our best way to do that, especially for the small suppliers, is through these free cybersecurity services that DoD has funded us to give out to companies. So what we did is we said, what are the most common attack vectors that we see hitting small businesses, and how could we provide these active defense services to defend against them? So protective DNS. DNS is, the phone book of the internet. It helps you navigate without having to know every IP address for every website you're going to. Frequently abused by nation-state actors and criminal actors. We see them doing domain squatting, where they will take over a domain that looks to be legitimate and then host malware on it. We'll see them do typo squatting, where they'll take something that the human eye wouldn't recognize, where they put a 0 instead of an O, so that you visit the wrong site that is malicious on it. And so protective DNS offers a threat feed that blocks known malicious domains. So what we have done in that space is we've contracted with a third party who provides this service out to companies. What we then also do is, on the back end, we're running analytics, we're identifying new domains in our foreign aperture that are malicious, and we're feeding those into the service. So that service has about 1,200 companies enrolled in it today.
Wow.
And it's blocked 4 billion malicious domains for the companies enrolled. 500 million of
4
them
billion.
Are NSA unique domains.
Numbers.
It's a huge number. And so when it comes to that ransomware threat, we are blocking botnets, ransomware, malware command and control before that they can even visit the site. And so we have prevented significant pre-ransomware staging attacks by just blocking the connection, so that the small business employee who doesn't know any different can't visit that site that's going to pre-stage for ransomware.
And it is getting a little more murky to know who's the puppet, who's the proxies and ransomware
Absolutely.
gangs, organizations, whatever
Absolutely.
we want to call them. It gets difficult to discern who's sometimes in charge, right?
Absolutely. And I think the other thing we see when it comes to vulnerabilities is looking for unpatched systems is something that's on the global scale. I mean, when we saw Volt Typhoon, we saw global scanning to look for unpatched systems or misconfigured routers and then exploitation. And so that's the other part of our services is we offer, using commercial tools that scan the internet, helping these small businesses understand, here is your internet-facing footprint, here's where you're running outdated software, and here, very specifically, we see criminal actors exploiting this particular device that you're running, or nation-state actors. We need you to patch there. We see them patching 80% faster than industry standards because we give them that context to say, it's running right here, it's unsafe, and please address this.
And from an adversarial standpoint, they're going to ride in the surf anyway, right?
100%.
I mean, if it's exploited, it doesn't matter who exploits it, they're going to piggyback.
Exactly. And we see that all the time. And we see nation-state actors, you get in there and there's 3 different actors on one vulnerable device because they're all just opportunistic in their
And you brought up Volt Typhoon, and not to get into great specific, but we're still early stages in understanding the battle damage, the assessment and the consequence of that, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. And I think with Volt Typhoon, it's different tradecraft than we see for Volt Typhoon. It's more traditional espionage activity.
The intent
of it, yes. But once you get in that system,
you can exploit, attack,
really
whatever you want, right?
Whatever you want. And I think we've really looked at partnership has been so critical in that space to get out the detection guides. We had partners coming in the beginning saying, you're asking me to fish in the ocean and find, where they are in my network. And these networks are vast, they're dated, they need to be updated. And so helping narrow down the scope of what they should be looking for has been really critical in that space.
And do you see AI playing a significant role in all of this?
I think there are, there's always discussions on AI being used for defenders and offenders and who's going to benefit more from it. But especially when it comes to these techniques that require lots of logs and hunting through those logs, AI is incredibly powerful in that space for living off the land and techniques like that. How do you narrow down what a net defender has to look at? The AI can help. You teach it the techniques, you show it what to look for, and then it highlights for the net defenders what they need to pay attention to rather than asking them to, fish in this sea of network traffic.
So you've got PRC, CCP, probably the existential threat we're dealing with. But Russia, Iran, North Korea, and pretty much anyone that has a military has a cyber capability. I mean,
frankly, anybody who can connect to the internet has a cyber capability. And so I think the interconnectedness of the world means we're seeing, the nation-state actors with very specific goals, but also the opportunistic actors, the ransomware for service. I mean, it's become incredibly profitable for there to be access brokers and people to specialize in specific components of the attack chain and sell access back and forth. And so it's an extensive ecosystem. I think the good news is we still find that the basic cyber hygiene does address across the spectrum of all of the threats. And so kind of an investment into one or two things can benefit across the attack chain.
And feel free not to answer, but sort of safe havens, that's still a challenge, isn't it? There are a few countries that are providing safe haven for a lot of these bad criminal actors, which again, difficult to discern who's the proxy, who's the puppet, who's the master sometimes.
It's difficult to discern that, and it's also difficult to discern where they're coming from because they recognize, especially China, they can obfuscate their operations by jumping through, third-party countries, different infrastructure, and so, if you're being targeted by a small home office router in Kansas, you don't really realize that that IP address that's rating as Kansas is really, a Chinese actor coming after you.
And criminal enterprises are becoming more and more sophisticated. I mean, literally, their capabilities would have been in the hands of maybe 5 countries 5 years ago.
Yep. Yeah, and I think AI is an area where that is also adding. We see, phishing emails are incredibly realistic now. Before you could train employees to detect something that was malicious so they wouldn't click on a malicious link. All of that is getting harder because of the commercialization and availability of AI for all the cyber criminals. That's why they're getting better. You can, ask AI to code for you and build a malicious exploit for you in a lot of cases.
And defenders too, right?
Exactly.
So it's kind of funny. Every major industry leader tends to think AI benefits the blue, the defender. A lot of the national security folks sort of say, hey, it actually defends, because I think part of the challenge is it's a little bit like terrorism. We've got to be right all the time, right? So that's an unfair sort of playing field.
I think our net defenders are overworked and underappreciated, 100%. They have to block everything.
All the time.
All the time. And And I think when it comes to resilience, that's an unrealistic expectation. So
Exactly.
when you talk about, what should businesses do, recovery is an important angle of it, because they are going to be targeted day in and day out. They are not always going to get it right. And how do they segment, control, contain, and then continue operations?
I'm really glad you brought up the R word, resilience, because that's probably a better way to think about
100%.
these issues. We're never going to stop everything all the time from every perpetrator and every modality of attack, but we can enhance our systems. And I think that's especially important when it comes to ransomware and the threat that poses.
I 100% agree. And I think it goes back to trust as well. I think one of the interesting things about the Collaboration Center is, we just really know a lot about cyber actors, nation state, criminal actors, and we want to work with partners on that. We don't have a regulatory function. We don't have a contractual function. You don't have a contractual relationship with us, which means you can come to us to say, I really have no idea what this thing is. And we can have that conversation that says, this is who we think it is. This is what we see that actor doing, if we know. And then when you get to the point where you've had a compromise and you need to do your incident reporting, like, you do all that separately and outside of us. But I think the sophistication and the way actors can pose as each other make it really hard to figure out what the impact is. Having that trusted space to come in and say, what is this? I got this email. I don't know. Can you tell me anything about this? So that they can do that investigation on their own and then decide what the impact is a really important aspect of this space.
And that's, again, back to the giving back, which I think is unique and keep that I'm glad it's in the DNA and I hear it from others. I'm not just because you're in front of me that is, in fact, the case. One thing to get inside the beltway a little bit. So CISA 2015 reauth or 2025 or CISA, if we want to, so we don't confuse it with the agency. Would that have, so I'm hearing from a lot of industry that could have significant implications on public-private partnerships, and if you don't have liability protection, it's not going to be the operators. They always lean forward, but the general counsels of those companies might have a different idea. So.
Yeah, I think what we've recognized is protected information sharing is absolutely critical. And so the Cyber Information Sharing Act of 2015 enabled companies to share information with the government that was protected so that they could have conversations about what was happening. So those programs are incredibly important. I mentioned trust is incredibly important, and everybody has a legal counsel advising them. So for us, we don't have to have partners share under that, but some do. It enables us to share more rapidly with our counterparts in the government. And so it's incredibly important to have programs that are protecting the sharing from liability protections for our companies to be transparent. And we get asked a lot, why is industry always tipping you sometimes? And the answer is because they're the ones who are the target all the time. And so they're going to, of course, see it because we're not monitoring their networks, nor should we. And so in order for them to share that safely, it's important to have those policies and those overhead structures in place that protect the sharing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that, because they literally are on the front lines. That's what
100%.
Differentiates cyber from other forms of conflict is they are the front lines, and none of them went into business thinking they had to defend against China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and every other bad actor.
Exactly.
So that's why efforts like this are so important.
And I think that's where our conversations with these small businesses, they're small businesses that build, a specific widget for the Department of Defense. Their IT person is their HR person, who's their payroll person, who does three jobs most days. So explaining to them that, contracting data is very publicly available, and once you win a contract, you do become on a target list to say, like, what do they have on their network? Can I use their trusted relationships with other companies to abuse them and move laterally? And so that education piece has been critical. They don't know where to start with a cyber program when they're a small company trying to make payroll.
And I do think small, medium-sized, that and state, local, tribal, territorial, and that's not in your mission set, but small and medium-sized businesses are. And I'd be curious sort of what you think resilience looks like across critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I think, what we have seen is the cybersecurity and the technology community really being proactive in partnership with us to defend their customers. And I think there's an education piece for these small businesses to understand, what is internet facing? What would I do if part of my network went down? How would I reconstitute that? That's kind of on the small business or the critical infrastructure entity. But I think what we've seen is this community that can provide them cloud services that are secure by default. They start with MFA. They're protecting them inherently. that's where we really get to an ecosystem that's protecting critical infrastructure in the United States.
And when I think of NSA, I mean, your reach and capacity and capabilities are immense. And baking security into the design or cyber-informed engineering, whatever terminology we want to use, DOE, CISA have different terminologies, but you guys actually are the one place that probably could do that across the board, right?
Yeah, and we do a lot of work with NIST on the standards community to make sure that our secure technology proposals are going into the international standards discussions. That's where we've seen specific nation states trying to sway international standards discussions to benefit their technologies. And so how do we partner with industry in the U.S. and with the standards organizations to make sure that they are not influencing our standards negatively so that products that are more secure can be in the ecosystem rather than Chinese developed products that are going to enter the ecosystem with perhaps more vulnerabilities.
I'm going to ask you to go back to a little bit of your previous role in terms of workforce. How do we arm the women and men of the next generation to be ahead of the game? It's a tough challenge. There's no silver bullet, I know.
It is a tough challenge. And I think for us, we have had great success with development programs at the National Security Agency, exposing employees to the offensive and the defensive side, helping them understand how an attacker thinks so that you can be a good defender is a good space. Starting education really early has been critical too. Running Gen Cyber camps. We have centers of academic excellence where we're giving them curriculum for the cybersecurity community. I think all of those are to build the foundation. I think once you get in, we have to get better at having agility moving in and out of government.
And constantly, I'm glad you brought that up. That's complicated. Yes. The lawyers have a say in some of this, but that is essential because at the end of the day, we talk about purple and interagency, and I'm a big proponent of that. But when it comes to cyber, industry has to be part of that 100%. Equation. And you have to find reasons. And maybe you don't stay for 40 years. Maybe you stay for 10 years. You come back with new skills, and all boats rise, right?
Absolutely. One of the first things I did when I ran that workforce initiative is we established an alumni program to say, you were here for a bit, you're going out, think of us, stay in touch with us. When you want to come back, let's have a process to get you back in faster if we can. And that's been really critical. So for me, a lot of my employees in the Collaboration Center worked at NSA, went out to industry, and decided to come back for various reasons. They wanted to serve again. And they are some of my best employees because they understand both sides. Absolutely. I'll say the other thing is true as well. Almost every one of our partners has a former NSAer at it, and they just speak the same language. You can have better conversations with them because they understand what we do, what we have to offer. And so it's beneficial for me to have those former NSAers in companies as well.
Unequivocally. And we touched on AI, but how do you see it changing the landscape? And how is the center in particular utilizing machine learning and other techniques?
Yeah, so I think AI is just going to add to the speed with which we see the attack chain move. And so we stood up an AI security center within the Collaboration Center about 1.5 years ago now, really with the recognition that this technology is rapidly evolving. And so we've been partnering with industry to...
And you have a center under you, right?
Yes,
focused
we do.
On AI.
The AI Security Center is one of our organizations, and it's really focused on how do we partner with those frontier AI labs who are building this technology to secure their intellectual property, to understand where adversaries are targeting them to get it, how are they abusing AI so that we can work with those partners, but also how do we do red teaming to see what's different about how you would target an AI system versus a traditional information system and get those mitigations out.
And coupling that with the cybersecurity mission, I think, is essential because AI is a little bit like cyber. It's a means to an end, but it's its own domain as well.
Well, and
right?
also the research component. So we have a research director at NSA that has been, looking at emerging technologies for years. We pulled that research component also into the AI Security Center so that there are years of research into how AI works, what are the underlying algorithms in it. So there's just different threat vectors when it comes to AI, and those folks are really uniquely positioned to understand how it could be targeted.
Now shoot me down. I am actually concerned about quantum, because at the end of the day, and if you're in the secret stealing business or in the defending of secret business, that could change the game.
Yeah,
could it not?
100%. And when we talk about a cryptologically relevant quantum computer, it's really when, not if. This point, we know that there's a lot of investment going into that, and that really takes our current public key cryptography and blows it out of the water. And so what we're really focused on is how do we upgrade all of the cryptographic inventory of the United States and national security systems to be quantum resistant.
It's a huge job. And post-quantum, I mean, we
100%.
have to be thinking in that direction,
And
right?
we've gotten to a point where we have the algorithms ready. We've been working with NIST in that. So it's just the recipe is there, but how do we, frankly, as a nation, take on that massive upgrade of all of our cryptographic material is a huge underpinning that we're leading.
So you're saying I'm not an alarmist.
You are not an alarmist. I think this is a realistic
and
discussion we need to have.
It can change the way all of us do business. And I'm going to ask you, this is a race we cannot lose.
100%. 100%. And so we have to be ready for it. And industry is really coming in to be ready because they're a huge part of this
Absolutely.
too. And so getting, the technical specifications defined, the algorithms was a big win, and now how do we have a roadmap and how are we budgeting as a community to implement and upgrade all of our devices is an important
Kristina,
angle.
you covered so much territory, and what questions didn't I ask that I should have?
Oh gosh, I think when it comes to where are we going, I think that's a good question. We have rapidly adjusted in the last 5 years to how we partner with industry. I'm not sure when any of us started that we knew we would be where we are today from a partnership perspective. I think as far as where we're going, where we really want to move to is, our focus is getting as much actionable intelligence out to the people who can defend at scale as we can. And what are their barriers that maybe are stopping them from actioning that information? We've been in a lot of conversations with our industrial base now to say, what do you need from us, from the community, so that you can really defend against these sophisticated actors at scale? Is it a risk decision? They always have to decide, what to do with our intelligence. And so that's where we really want to get our industrial base really comfortable with being able to defend at scale and action our information as broadly as possible.
You've got the why, that's obvious. The how is just as important, and this is not to throw props, but to do it in a genuinely collaborative kind of way, I think is almost as essential. And the when is now, I think we know that.
Yes.
But all things said and done, thank you for your public service, thank you for advancing the ball, thank you for all the good work you're doing, and keep that how in addition to the why front and center. So, Kristina, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really appreciated having you on and covered so much territory.
We did. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Cyber Focus. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing. Your ratings and reviews help us reach more listeners. Drop us a line if you have any ideas in terms of topics, themes, or individuals you'd like for us to host. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and stay curious.